Welcome back. And let's not waste any time because right out of the gate, I am dropping a perfectly mediocre 2.5 out of 5 stars on Netflix's new survival flick, Apex. And honestly, that's probably me being incredibly generous to this movie. And that's why today I'm going to recap this film. We're going to do a breakdown of that messy ending, and we're going to do a review of why this film tries way too hard. And in my opinion, this movie is what happens when you mix Split and Silence of the Lambs and set it in the Outback or the Australian wilderness. This movie has it all, or almost everything. It's got cannibals, terrible decision making, but the one thing that is missing in all of this is zero wildlife. And I'm not sure how in the Australian wilderness or the outback or wherever the hell this is set at, how in general there are just no wildlife. And another thing, if you're looking for a hero in this film, then you're probably looking in the wrong place because there is none here. So let's go ahead and get into it, because the movie kicks off with Sasha, played by Charlize Theron, and her husband Tommy, played by Eric Bana, who I'm not sure why he's credited in his film because he is literally in it only for the beginner. But they're doing a tandem rock climb in Norway. So a storm rolls in, the avalanche happens, and Tommy gets knocked off the mountain, and he almost gets to a point where he's pulling both of them down. So Sasha has to make a decision in this situation, and honestly, it's a terrible situation to be in. So Sasha has to cut Tommy loose, and while that's a tragedy for sure, that is the last that we see of Eric Bana's character in this film, outside of a little cameo flashback a couple of minutes later, I believe. And I'm not sure what the lesson was supposed to be there, but there really wasn't one. But the film does move along pretty quickly after that, because we end up 5 months later with her in Australia now. And we learn that she's there to, scatter the memories of Tommy into the ocean. And it's not really explained if the ocean was Tommy's happy place or not, but he was talking about retiring up on a mountain and, maybe doing something a little bit more chill and not so exciting and adventurous. So maybe this is what they had in plan and it just wasn't explained to us. But the crazy thing here is when she heads into the national park, she gets the warning that everybody gets in these types of survival movies. And this time it's the warning of, hey, there's a lot of missing people. Hey, this park is kind of dangerous. People have been going missing lately. And, we see all their missing posters on the wall. But of course, we are not going to heed to any warnings because we're just going to go about our day like these warnings didn't even happen. Because if we did, this movie would have been a short film. And other than meeting the park ranger and a couple other jerks there, she meets Ben, played by Taron Egerton. Now, Ben seems like a nice guy who's just there and chivalrous. And, he's just there to sell his beef jerky. Spoiler alert, that we definitely learn later is not beef jerky, and this will never get FDA approved. But I guess that's why this is in Australia, and he can just sell his jerky to the local store. So fast forwarding along through some water rafting scenes and some camping scenes, we find out that Sasha's bag gets stolen, all of her gear gets stolen, and she goes off to find it, and she runs back into Ben again. Coincidence, not a coincidence, right? But long story short, she realizes that eventually that Ben is hunting her. And honestly, from there, the movie kind of turns into this violent game of Dora the Explorer. Sasha steps into a bear trap at one point. She gets captured, and then she's taken to Ben's cave where he hangs her up. And you see all these other bodies of the people that we saw in those missing posters, at least some of them, because Ben has been capturing everybody. And that's the reason that everybody's really missing. But I guess they didn't do a really good police investigation into all of those missing cases, because they told us in the film that, while this was originally attributed to just hiking accidents, it turns out that it was just one man. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. But down here in these caves is where this movie starts to get a little bit off the rails, because this is where Ben reveals what those rituals he was talking about early in the film are. He's practicing cannibalistic tribal rituals. And, he has that photo of his mommy by the bed, and we learn that, his mother was his first victim, and now she gets to live with him on the inside. And I'm not sure if he really thought about that through all the way, because you ate your mom. So she's not going to be inside of you for long, because eventually when you take a shit, she's going to come out. So I'm not sure what your mom's going to be doing then, unless you're just going to, anyways. But I guess this was done in a way to kind of drive home that, hey, Ben is crazy. He killed and ate his mother. So Sasha in this moment, she decides that she doesn't want to be an appetizer. And Ben goes to attack her, whatever the case may be, and she bites his ear off, and eventually they tumble into the water and end up in a ravine, and they realize that the only way to get up out of this ravine is to tandem climb. Yes, the very thing that traumatized Sasha at the very beginning of this movie when she lost her husband, and it was referenced throughout by Ben being an asshole. She has to tandem climb with Ben. And I'm not sure how that would feel to have to do something with your cannibal stalker, but you really can't make this up. So let's go ahead and get into this ending and explain it, because the mechanics of this finale just definitely need a magnifying glass, because a lot happened and I'm not really sure it was all explained why. So the one thing that I left out when I said Sasha and Ben fell into this ravine was that she crushed his leg with a rock afterwards, So now they're basically laying there together and I guess trying to figure out how they're going to get out. So they eventually decide to tandem climb out. And as Sasha and Ben are scaling this wall together, Ben being the crazy person that he is in this film, he's very, very suspicious of this whole situation, and he's not trying to get dropped off the side of a wall, a very high one at that. Like, this dude knows that he needs Sasha to complete this climb, but he just does not shut up. His ego or whatever it is, split personality, not sure, because they didn't really define his character well, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But he just wouldn't shut up about Tommy. And why would you mock somebody about their husband's death while they're basically carrying you up the side of a mountain, ravine, or whatever you want to call it? And all it does is buy Sasha's time to basically come up with a plan to basically cut this bum loose. But she ultimately does betray him, if you really want to call it a betrayal. It's not like they were some type of team. But here's how this betrayal happens, though. Sasha ties her knot up on this ledge. She ties her knot to this little janky ass tree. And Ben, not really paying attention, but he's paying attention. He thinks he's secure. So Ben, still being the dickhead that he is, just talking shit. Basically, he kind of figures out that, oh, maybe I'm not attached to this. So he starts trying to yank her off the side. So she eventually falls with her, but he's not very secure anymore. So Ben falls to his death. And it is very, very, they don't really show a lot of it, but we get a quick glimpse of him falling and crashing onto the rocks and being splattered open. And that's pretty much the end of Ben. And when I really sat back and looked at everything afterwards, I think thematically what they were going for in this situation was Ben was the physical manifestation of Sasha's grief, and him falling and collapsing and busting wide open on those rocks was her way of relieving herself of all of that pain that she had when Tommy died. But the real question here is, we know Netflix loves sequels. Does this set up a sequel? Because there's no post-credit scene. There's nothing. The credits just roll and the film is over. And that's really that. But I could really see where, because it's Netflix, you never know if they're just going to throw her into another situation because she is adventurous. Maybe she just ends up being hunted by somebody else. Or maybe this movie just picks up because those guys that were kind of picking at her earlier, we don't know what happened to them. So maybe those guys will hunt her down next, and then she'll have to be the apex predator to them. Because quite honestly, that's the only time we see wildlife in this film, and it's already dead on the back of their truck. So outside of that, there's zero wildlife. And the wildlife really should have played a bigger aspect in this film, because we're in the Australian wilderness. So it just makes no sense to me on why the wildlife just wouldn't play a bigger role in this film. And with that, like I said earlier, my final verdict is 2.5 out of 5 stars. And everything I just told you is the reason why. The acting in this film was probably the only thing that kept this movie from completely flatlining, because the story wasn't great at all. Taron Egerton really dug into that split type energy, and he played a really good villain. He was claustrophobic, he was tension ridden, but they never really dug too much into his mommy issues and why that turned him into some type of unhinged cannibal. And on top of that, the pacing and the logic was absolutely atrocious, honestly. Apex was setting out to be this deep psychological thriller, but it ends up being not even close to a PG-13 Saw movie. And all of the missed opportunities that they had, like I said earlier, with the wildlife. Like, we're in Australia, so we have crocodiles, we have dingoes, and in my opinion, the environment should have been a secondary villain or the primary antagonist, and maybe Taron Egerton's character, Ben, could have came second, because the environment of Ben in that wilderness, it just seemed like nothing. They were just out there. She could move about. There was one snake that was in her tent, and Ben probably put it there. And that was it. That was the only environmental threat. one snake. And I don't know, outside of that, the characters in this film just make a lot of dumb decisions. And then you have Sasha that steps into a bear trap and then gets thrown down a ravine. And then moments later, maybe not moments, but hours later, she can all of a sudden climb a steep rock mountain like structure, and she can do it like she doesn't have any pain at all. Like, I think they showed a glimpse of like her foot maybe being a different color or dirty. I don't know, but she was caught literally in a bear trap. He dragged her several times while she was stuck in this bear trap. So her foot and ankle should at least be swollen. And that climb shouldn't have been as easy, but that's just my opinion. But ultimately, this sloppy script was rescued by the A-listers that were acting in this film, because without them, this movie probably would have been unwatchable. And I guess that's my unfiltered take on all of this. And before we wrap, I've got one question for you all. Do you guys think this movie would have survived if it didn't have a pretty decent soundtrack and the good actors? Because I just told you what my opinion was, and I don't think it would have made it. But you let me know what you think about this film, and if it would. Did you even watch this film? Because it's been billed as this really good psychological thriller, and I'm sure most of us are probably watching it or whatever the case may be, but how do we feel about it after we've watched it? Because while I was watching it, the first 20 minutes of the film, outside of Tommy dying, nothing happens. 20, 30 minutes, like nothing really happens. So everything really happens in like the back hour of the film, not even really an hour, like 45 minutes of the film. Because it is a fast-paced movie, and it does move pretty well, somewhat. The pacing is fast, but the logic is low, if that makes sense. You'll see if you check out the film, and if you have checked out the film, let me know what you think about it down in the comments. And if you want more reviews, recaps, and breakdowns like these, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to come back for more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you for coming.